3 sisters, found dead in the woods, killed by the one person who was supposed to keep them safe, their dad. And for nearly 3 months afterward, nobody could find him. Not the police, not the FBI, not the US Marshals. Hundreds of searchers, helicopters, dogs, nothing. Here's how it started. Friday, May 30th, 2025. A normal custody pickup. 3 girls, ages 5, 8, and 9, climb into their father's truck. Excited, happy, heading off for the weekend with Dad. Whitney Decker watched them go. Nothing felt wrong. By that night, they hadn't come home. By Monday, they were dead. And their father, Travis Decker, was gone, vanished into one of the most remote, brutal stretches of wilderness in Washington state. His truck was found abandoned, miles from anywhere. Personal items left inside, a bloody handprint on the outside. But no Travis, not hiding inside, not waiting nearby, just gone. What happened in those 3 days between the pickup and that truck? The only person who knows is the man nobody could find. And here's the part that should scare you more than any of it. This wasn't sudden. It wasn't random. There were warnings, months of them, on paper, in court, in a judge's file, and every single one of them was missed or ignored until it was too late. Welcome to the Hidden Chapters, uncovering the truth behind every crime. It was supposed to be the most ordinary Friday of the year. Whitney Decker watched her 3 daughters, Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia, climb into their father's white pickup truck for a scheduled custody visit. No argument, no tension, just a dad picking up his girls the way he had dozens of times before. The girls were excited. They always were when it came to time with their father. Then he drove off, and that was the last time anyone saw them alive. Whitney expected them home by 8 p.m., and by 8 p.m. they didn't come back. She called Travis. No answer. She called again, straight to voicemail. At first, she told herself it was nothing. A dead phone, bad timing, a late drive back. But Travis had never missed curfew. Not once. By the time the sun went down that Friday, Whitney Decker already knew, somewhere underneath the explanations she was telling herself, that something was very wrong. By the next morning, Whitney called police. An endangered missing persons alert went out across the state. Travis Decker's white GMC Sierra was now the most watched vehicle in Washington. Search teams mobilized. Helicopters went up. Tip lines opened. And still, nothing. No sightings. No calls. No trace of the truck, the girls, or their father. For 2 days, an entire region held its breath, hoping for the best, bracing for the worst. Then, on June 2nd, 3 days after the girls vanished, a sheriff's deputy was working a remote area near Rock Island Campground off Icicle Road outside Leavenworth, and he found something. A white pickup truck, sitting alone in a clearing, empty. The truck was parked deep in the woods. No sign of Travis, no sign of the girls, at first. Then searchers moved further into the campground and found them. 9-year-old Peyton, 8-year-old Evelyn, 5-year-old Olivia, all 3 dead. An autopsy later confirmed how. The girls had been bound with zip ties, plastic bags placed over their heads. Cause of death, suffocation. Manner of death, homicide. There was no struggle with a stranger. No forced entry into anyone's life. The last person seen with these girls was their father, and near the truck, investigators found something else, a bloody handprint. Inside, Travis's wallet and other personal belongings left behind. He hadn't driven away from this place. He'd walked into the wilderness on foot, and somewhere out there, in hundreds of square miles of forest, he was still moving. What followed became one of the largest manhunts the Pacific Northwest had seen in years. Local police, the Chelan County Sheriff's Office, Washington State Patrol, and the U.S. Marshals Service all joined the search. A $20,000 reward was offered for information leading to his capture. Helicopters swept the ridgelines. Ground teams combed dense forest, dirt roads, and backcountry trails around Icicle Road. The terrain worked against them. Steep, forested, largely untouched. The kind of landscape where a person could move for days without crossing a road or a trail camera. And Travis wasn't just anyone moving through it. He was a former Army infantryman. He'd deployed to Afghanistan, earned an expert infantryman badge, qualified as a paratrooper, and once spent over 2 months living entirely off-grid in the backwoods, completely alone. A retired Special Forces officer who reviewed his record later made an important distinction. Travis hadn't gone through elite survival training like SEER school. He wasn't some unstoppable ghost. But he didn't need to be. He just needed to know how to disappear into a forest he'd practically grown up in. Weeks passed. Searchers found nothing. No camps, no supplies, no footprints leading anywhere. And the question stopped being, where did he go? It became something much darker. Was he even still out there at all? More than half the people who watch our documentaries aren't subscribed. If you're enjoying the investigation so far, consider subscribing. Now let's go back to the months before the murders, because that's where some of the most important pieces of this story were hiding. To understand why this case shocked so many people, you have to understand who Travis Decker appeared to be before May of 2025. He grew up in the Wenatchee area. In 2013, at 20 years old, he enlisted in the Army as an infantryman. He deployed to Afghanistan, attended leadership training at Fort Benning, earned his expert infantryman badge, qualified as a parachutist, and spent time assigned to a Ranger battalion. Not a special operations soldier, not the survival expert some headlines later suggested, but someone comfortable outdoors and accustomed to difficult environments. That part mattered. Because long before investigators searched forests and campgrounds looking for him, Travis was already spending much of his free time in places most people avoided. Friends described someone who could disappear into the mountains for days with very little preparation. Someone who enjoyed solitude. Someone who was comfortable being alone. He eventually married Whitney. Together, they had 3 daughters: Peyton, Evelyn, Olivia. Family photos from those years show camping trips, hikes, birthdays, ordinary moments that looked much like any other young family. But almost a full year before that truck was ever found, warning signs were already appearing. They were documented. They were filed. And they were sitting in a court record long before anyone knew how this story would end. September 2024. This is where the story really starts. Whitney filed to modify the parenting plan. In her filing, she laid it out plainly. Since their separation, Travis had been struggling to maintain stability, particularly with housing and a predictable schedule, and it was starting to affect their daughters. Then she said something that, looking back, is almost unbearable to read. She wrote that after his transition out of active duty and into the reserves, Travis's borderline personality disorder and narcissism had worsened. A diagnosis. In a court filing. 8 months before the murders. She wasn't trying to cut him out of his daughters' lives. Travis has made huge sacrifices to serve our country and loves his girls very much, but he has got to get better for our girls, she wrote. I do not want to keep Travis from the girls at all. To the contrary, I have bent over backwards to facilitate that relationship. This wasn't a vindictive ex-wife. This was a mother trying to get her ex-husband help while protecting her kids in the meantime. On August 27th, 2024, Travis and Whitney appeared before Chelan County Superior Court Judge Robert Jordan. Whitney's attorney, Ariana Cozart, argued there had been a substantial change in circumstances as to father's ability to parent children safely, and asked the court to order Travis to undergo both a domestic violence evaluation and a psychiatric assessment. Travis pushed back. And what he said in that courtroom is one of the most chilling details in this entire case. He argued it was important his children understand the reality of how the world works, and that they could learn from his current condition. He wasn't denying anything was wrong. He was arguing his daughters should be exposed to it. The court didn't agree. On September 27, 2024, the judge modified the plan. Whitney was granted near full custody. Travis's time was cut to every other weekend, daytime only, 3 hours on Fridays, 8 hours on weekends, no overnights. He had to stay within the Wenatchee Valley. Whitney's attorney framed it gently in court. "We're not asking that visitation stop. She just doesn't want the children living out of a truck or in a tent in somebody's backyard." The judge's response was almost casual. "Which seems to be reasonable," he said, and approved it on the spot. Here's the part almost nobody talks about. The court also ordered Travis to get a psychiatric assessment and mental health treatment. He didn't comply. Court records reviewed months later confirmed it. He had borderline personality disorder, he was experiencing active mental health issues, and he was refusing to take medication for it. A court order, sitting there, unenforced, for 8 months. Meanwhile, his living situation kept getting worse. He was homeless, living out of his truck, in motels, in campgrounds. He'd fallen more than $20,000 behind on child support. For 8 months, this was the man picking his daughters up every other weekend. A man with a documented personality disorder he wasn't treating. A man with no home. And by all accounts, this arrangement was working really well. Right up until May 30th, the day he picked them up and never brought them home. For nearly 3 months, Travis Decker was a ghost. No confirmed sightings, no verified contact. The search expanded, contracted, expanded again, but the man at the center of it never surfaced. Then, in September 2025, in a remote area near Grindstone Mountain, searchers found human remains. DNA testing confirmed it. Travis Decker. The manhunt was over, but it answered only one thing: where he ended up. In the end, this isn't a story about a manhunt. It isn't really about Travis Decker at all. It's about 3 sisters who climbed into their father's truck expecting an ordinary weekend and never came home. It's about a court file full of warnings that were heard, documented, and never followed up on. Investigators found evidence. They found answers. Eventually, they found Travis. But none of it changes what happened to Peyton, Evelyn, and Olivia, or why. For investigators, the case is closed. For everyone who reads that court file now and wonders what could have been different, it never will be.
If this case stayed with you, you're not the only one. And if you're ready for the details most people miss, there's more waiting in the full Hidden Chapters playlist.